touch on how you went from bartending into mortgage.
It's a really interesting and funny story. And I think you know it already. But so I was, I don't know, I was 28 years old, 29 years old, whatever it was. And I was managing Pearls and bartending and waiting tables, right? And I knew this buddy of mine who was in the mortgage business. And I'm like, I need to buy a house. That's the next step in my life, right? I'm, almost 30 years old. I should own a house. So
Single at the time?
I was not. I was not married, but I was not.
Okay,
I was not.
you were heading that way.
I was heading that way.
Mm-hmm.
And I called my buddy Mark, and I said, "Hey, listen, I want to buy a house." He goes, "Okay, well, bring your W-2s to the restaurant tomorrow, and I'll come up there and I'll take a look at it. I need to see your paycheck stubs, right? That's what you do when you qualify somebody."
Yeah.
So I came in, I sat down with him, he looked at him, and he goes, "You got the wrong job." He goes, "How would you like to be in the mortgage business?" And I don't think he would have given me that opportunity if he hadn't have seen me and worked with me in that restaurant business over the years.
Well, I think it's
So
important
big
to
shout
touch
out
on
to
that.
Mark Greco. Thanks for getting me in the business.
Mark, amazing top producer over many, many years.
Yep.
So I think it's important for our audience to hear that you used a relationship that you had from Mark, who you had worked with prior,
Right.
who
That's
had gotten into mortgage.
This is life, by the way.
Yeah, it is. And it's paying attention to what's laid out in front of you. And so you were focused on getting a house. You go to Mark, and was there an aha moment for him when he said that, but for you, where did that light
Well,
turn
I'm like,
on?
well, what is the mortgage business?
Yeah.
I'm like, huh? You just help people buy houses, right? And he goes, I'm not a real estate agent. I help you get the money to buy the house. I'm like, okay. He goes, why don't you come work part-time? Don't quit your job, for gosh sakes.
This was late 90s, by the way. This was
Early 90s.
Was it?
It was early 90s. No, it's
97?
This is before my daughter was born. This is before she was even an inkling. This is 94.
Okay, 94?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Okay, that's 28 years ago. Okay.
Yeah,
About the same
94.
time. We both got in about the same time then.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
rates were not low. Let's be,
and I'll tell you,
our young audience needs to
I'll
understand.
jump ahead a little
Yeah.
bit. The first loan I ever did was a refinance for somebody who refinanced from 14% to 9.5% on a 15-year
Elated.
fix and sent me flowers. So he goes, come try it. I go, okay. Well, I had to work both. I had to keep my day job because he goes, I'm not paying you.
Right.
You only get paid if you close a loan. And so I remember walking in the first day and into the office over in the Echelon buildings off of 183.
Because it was called Echelon Mortgage,
It
right?
was, yeah.
Kind of like Northland Funding,
it was
right?
Miracle Mortgage before I got there, but it was Echelon Mortgage. And I remember going, okay. So he goes, here's a loan application. Now go get somebody to fill it out who wants to refinance or buy a house. I'm like, okay. So Keller Williams is downstairs. And I would go to Keller Williams all the time. And I got another funny story about that.
But by the way, for our audience, that was Keller Williams number one.
That was it. Joe
Joe,
Williams was there. They were all there.
Gary, yep.
They go, okay, so you take the application, you gather their documentation. If you're going to pull, this is when you had to pull a credit report, you called the credit bureau with their information, and they would fax you just like not a full credit, not an RMCR, but just a regular credit report. They didn't have a lot of stuff. No credit scores at this time, by the way. And
On roll paper?
On roll paper. So you use that. Okay, they don't have any late payments on anything. And then like 3 days later, you'd get the RMCR, Residential Mortgage Credit Report, the full one in
the ones we
in
paid
the
like
mail.
$6 for, right?
In the mail, right? You get it in the mail. And so
they came in like 8.5 by 14.
Right. And then you'd have to fill out the application. They go, okay, we can do it. And then you would send it off to an underwriter by FedEx, and then they would fax in these conditions. Sometimes they would just mail you a conditions list.
You get the appraisal with the photos with the tape on the back.
Yeah. And I didn't even know what a title company was. I'm like, what is this mythical title company thing?
Yeah.
Well, that's where you do the closings. I know, but why? Well, that's just how it's done. Okay, that's how it's done. What's this interest rate? What are points? What are basis points?
And I think that if I could add to that, we got in about the same time, right?
Yeah.
And there wasn't a playbook, right?
No.
There wasn't, you're going to study to be an attorney. Okay, you know what to do. You pass the bar. Okay. You want to be a physician. You want to be, okay, you know what you need to do to get to the end game. In mortgage, like you said, they throw you a 1003 application and say, go get them, boy.
Yeah.
Rates are only 9%. They're falling off the trees.
Yeah. But the funny thing is people were still buying houses back
then. Yeah.
And it was anyway. So my first month, I think I made $3,200, which was more than I was making at the restaurant.
Okay.
And then the next month I made like $2,800,
Mhm.
which was more than I was making at
But
the
you were
restaurant.
building a pipeline.
Building a pipeline. Then I'm like, I don't need 2 jobs anymore. I'm gonna quit the restaurant business.
Yeah.
And I remember my last day, and I'm like, peace out,
Yep.
you know.
Yep.
And I didn't
But
make
you
a
stayed friendly.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we went
You
there
got
for
a lot of
happy hour.
business.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
got a lot of business out of
Mhm.
that. But it was funny. Then the 2 months after that first 2 months, Zippo
Mhm.
motivates you. By the
Yep.
way, that
Mhm.
is luckily back then you didn't have cell phones, you didn't have all these other things that would
Yep.
that cause. I don't know how young people live anymore.
Mhm.
Right? I mean, they all have $200 cell phone bills. They have all
Mhm.
these other, internet,
All
HBO
that.
Max and blah
Mhm.
blah Netflix and all this other stuff. I don't know how they did it. Back then, I had my rent, electricity, which included gas and
Mhm.
water,
Mhm.
and I didn't have a car payment, and it was made it a lot easier. Anyway, so I went through those 2 months. Those 2 months taught me, though, in this business that it's not all fun and games,
Yeah.
right? You've
Yeah.
got to be constantly working, constantly out. And I remember that
You're
third.
self-employed on
Yeah,
day one.
you are
Mhm.
self-employed, and I
Mhm.
remember that first that third month when I didn't have anything in the pipeline, and
Mhm.
I'm like, I just quit my job, and now
Mhm.
I have no loans closing, and I'm like, I've been going down to Keller Williams downstairs for like 6 or 7 weeks all the
Yeah.
time, and they would be like, oh, just put your card here. They would
Yeah.
never let me in the
Mhm.
back,
Mhm.
so I said, you know what, I'm going to go down there, and I went down there. And I'm talking to the receptionist. I go, just let me go put my stuff in their little cubbies back there because they
Mhm.
had their little
Yep.
mail
Yep. Yep.
cubbies,
Yep.
right? I go, let me put a flyer on the wall back there. Let me just go talk to somebody back there. And it's like, no, 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 no. And something that changed my mortgage life was this amazing woman walks from the back. Blonde hair, name is Lila Nelson. Lila, peace out.
Mhm.
Peace to
Yep.
you.
We love her.
We love her. Lila walks out and she goes, what is your name? I go, John McClellan. She goes, I'm not Lila Nelson. And she goes, why don't you come on back here with me? She goes, I've heard you come up here and no for like weeks now. And so I thought after all that perseverance, I might as well talk to you.
Love it.
And I closed a loan with her like about not the next month because you got to get
Yep.
under
Yep. Yep.
contract. And then you close out that. And I remember that client was. His name
You
was
did.
Nolly Williams, who's
Okay.
now a
Now,
real estate.
yeah.
Who's Nolly, who's a real
Uh-huh.
estate agent now, a
Uh-huh.
really successful one. And but back then he owned a record company.
Okay.
And he bought a house. I still remember the house is out in towards Del Diamond, out that
Uh-huh.
direction. Del
Uh-huh.
Diamond wasn't there at that point.
Which.
But I remember Lila gave me this chance, and she brought me in and introduced me to all these people,
Mhm.
and she helped forge my career from that beginning. But if I had just gone down there one time,
Yeah. Mhm.
nothing would have happened. And in the mortgage business, just like in life, you have to hit that tipping point,
Mhm.
right? If you work hard at something, there's a tipping point that's going to happen. The
Mhm.
problem is, especially the big deal is you never know when that tipping point, when all your hard work is going to turn over,
Yeah.
right?
You don't know when the no
It
is going
could
to turn
be
into
a
a yes.
week,
Yeah.
it could
Mhm.
be 2 months, it could
Mhm.
be 3 months. And
Mhm.
that when that tipping point happens, that's when everything makes sense that you've been doing.
Mhm.
But it doesn't make sense sometimes when you're moving forward.
Yeah.
And I tell my guys this all the time. You're going to do these things. They may
Mhm.
not feel right. It may not feel like you're
Your
getting
loan
any
officers.
traction.
Your loan
Yeah,
officers. Yeah.
or,
Mhm.
or my kids
your
or whatever
okay.
it
Yeah.
may be, just
Mhm.
life in general.
Which a lot of your loan officers are kind of like your kids. Yeah. I mean,
They
yeah.
yeah. Some
At
are as
this
old as my
point.
kids. But if you do all this hard work, at some point, there will be that tipping point where it pays off. I have a great example. I had this kid that worked for me. This is probably 12 years ago, 10 years ago. And he had been, I brought him under my wing because he was a personal trainer. Loved doing that. He was really good at, really motivated, worked his butt off. I'm like, that guy's a good salesman. He works.
Mhm.
He's got a
Mhm.
great work ethic. I'm going to bring it in. And Josh in my office, we lined out these things for him to do. Okay, you do this for 3 months.
Mhm.
Every day you do this, and every other day you do this, and you make these calls, and you go see these people, you go to these events. Then the phone will start ringing, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
About 2.5 months in, he was at his cubicle, and he stands up, and he walks over to my office, and he goes, "Hey, John." I go, "Yeah." And he goes, I have to quit. I can't do this anymore.
Mm.
I go, dude, you've been working so hard. You've been doing everything I said you should do. He goes, I go, let me talk you out of it. Just give it another couple of weeks. He goes, no, I've already accepted a job at a gym in Houston. I already signed a lease for an apartment. I'm moving.
Okay. Fair enough.
I just shook his hand. I said, good luck.
Yeah.
This business isn't for everybody.
Yeah.
The next day I walk by his desk and his voicemail light's blinking.
Mm.
Pick up the phone, call the voicemail. There's a client on there. Hey, this is so-and-so from Remax or whatever. Hey, will you call this client of mine? I'm like, Josh. And Josh picked up the phone, called the guy, got a loan out of it. The next day, there's 2 more messages from 2 other people. One was pointed to a refinance, one was a purchase. Literally within about a month period, there was probably 8 or 9 deals that came off that people just called his voicemail. And if he had just gone to another company, I would have sent it to him. But he was out of the business.
Yeah.
And so he didn't realize that he had hit the tipping point, and then he just decided not to move forward.
Yeah.
And then the tipping point happened.
Yeah.
Right while he was leaving. So you never know. And it's not just about sales, but it's about life too. Right. And that's why you always got to do the right thing and always push forward. If you make a mistake, regroup, then start making those good decisions again, because that tipping point will happen for you.
It does. And, but they say, it takes 7 or 8 or 9 no's, and it might take 10 or 11 or 12, but, the most recent no means I'm closer
if you're in
to
sales,
the next
you're
yes.
going to get a no.
Yeah.
I mean, anybody who thinks they're never going to get a no in life in general is an idiot.
Oh, it can help humble you.
Maybe it is
certainly
too strong.
can. Right. Well, that's strong. But, so is your hot sauce.
Well, we're going to trace that
we're
in a
going to
few
crush
minutes
into that
after we
here in a
talk
little
about
bit.
it.
I love it. So the interestingly enough, and you may not know this, but that was the first office, that Keller Williams office up in northwest Austin, was the first one that I really got my wings under me as well. We were probably there about the same time.
Yeah.
And how I figured out to get past that front desk was if I come in there on a Tuesday morning with a couple of boxes of donuts, because that's when they would have their office meetings. I just go past the front desk. Hey, these are for them. Oh yeah, of course. Here, you want one? Yeah, there you go. And then you sneak back there. You spend 5 or 10 minutes, and if somebody starts sniffing around, you go out the side door. You may remember the side back door they had there. Yeah. That was right by Mark's office. He had his office downstairs.
Well, we moved downstairs because there was Cynthia, then Joe's office, and then all that. Yeah. So we actually moved downstairs after a while. So
that was a great office.
In fact, I think Joe Williams' office was like literally on the other side of my wall.
And what people
he's such a great guy.
He's such a great guy, and what people don't realize about Joe Williams is that Gary was always the front man, but Joe was the one behind the scenes grinding. He was like that hamster on the wheel, and he flew under the radar. You remember he had that little cubicle desk area there that but he was an inspiration for a lot of the young Keller Williams agents, and I don't think he gets enough credit. He probably does, but a lot of people that are with the KW
just
organization,
a good guy too.
Yeah, great guys. And so when you started getting business from realtors, right? And you learned.
And builders. Because back then, a majority of the builders didn't have their own mortgage company.
They didn't.
So like Hammond's Homes, some of these other ones out
Milburn was one. Some of these.
So I really focused a lot on doing that, and it was really successful doing that too. And then my business just took off, and then I went to go work at National Mortgage Link, where I met you.
Yeah, and that was as you remember. Was it Steve Sampolesi? Sampolesi? Right, out of Houston?
Yes.
Had some of the best wingtip shoes.
Boy.
He was a
the buckles on his shoes.
Buckles on his shoes.
Gold buckles on his shoes.
He had the pinstripe suits out of Houston, and he was actually really good to us. He really was. And
we had a nice office right there in the
fantastic office. We were up off Far West.
Yeah, right at Far West and Executive Center Drive.
Yeah.
Actually, Wood Hollow and Executive Center Drive.
That's exactly where we were. And
my current office is literally 2 buildings from there still.
In that same complex?
Yeah, that whole complex.
Yeah,
I've been there for 18 years.
And that was such a great area of town. I think that our audience probably needs to understand that, if you're going to be boots on the ground, having an office in the right part of town really makes a difference.
Well, the demographic center of Austin back in the 90s was the Arboretum. And what I mean by the demographic center is that if you went in any direction, that's an equal amount of people would be spread out. So that was the economic center. That has actually morphed and moved further up 183 now. But back then, that was the center of the universe.
It really was,
right.
Yeah. And for those of you that don't know about Austin and how Austin has morphed, we've been here, for the better part of our entire lives. I moved here in the mid '90s.
I went to kindergarten and first grade here.
You did?
I did.
Okay. How about that?
I went to Terrytown Baptist Church for kindergarten, Dill Elementary for first grade, which is right off of Windsor. It's not there anymore. But that was a very long time ago.
But you built those.
We actually lived when my dad was going to UT prior to law school. We lived on Lake Austin Boulevard, and if you go down Lake Austin Boulevard off of Mopac, there's like a little convenience store that used to be a U-Totem there. Then right past that, there's these newer looking apartments, right?
Uh-huh.
Well, back in the 70s, those were all World War II barracks, right? And they were two-story barracks,
And
right?
the
But
university owns that land,
right, and
right?
they
Yeah.
converted them
Mhm.
into student housing, and that's
Mhm.
and we called it the Roach. Now Roach is literally this big,
Yeah. Uh-huh.
but it was I was in kindergarten, first grade,
Yeah.
second grade, so I didn't care. But I just remember just living over there, and they would have they would put somebody would put movies up with their big projector in the park right behind it, which is
Yeah.
probably gone now. But yeah, that was a simpler time of life in Austin.